He was one conversation away from either making history or abandoning the idea forever. Nobody knows what actually happened in that room on a March night in 1905. Except me. Because I was there. And I wasn't supposed to be. Bern, Switzerland, 1905. Somewhere in a modest apartment above a shop, a 26-year-old patent clerk spends his days doing the most unremarkable job imaginable, stamping and reviewing other people's inventions. Nobody around him has any idea what's happening inside his head. For decades, physics has been circling the same handful of unsolvable questions. About light, about motion, about the true nature of time, and every senior academic who's tried to crack them has quietly given up. This clerk has no lab, no university backing, no title. What he has is a notebook full of scratched-out equations, a broken clock outside his window that never seems to agree with any other clock in the city, and a question he's been chasing since he was 16 years old. Lately, he's begun to suspect it might not have an answer at all. By March, the toll is visible. Months of circling the same idea, tearing through page after page, convinced he's either sitting on something enormous or wasting his life chasing a question that was never real to begin with. His friends have stopped asking how the work is going. Even his wife has started to worry, watching him disappear into the same four walls night after night. On this particular evening, he's hunched over his desk by candlelight, and something feels different. The pages in front of him aren't just abandoned calculations anymore. They're the closest he's ever come to breaking through. And that is the exact night I choose to knock on his door. I don't waste time on introductions. I ask him one simple question, the kind of thing that would mean nothing to a stranger, but means everything to him. What would you see if you could ride alongside a beam of light? He doesn't even look up at first. He assumes I'm a lost neighbor. But when I repeat the question, he goes completely still. He tells me he's been laughed out of rooms for asking exactly that. I tell him maybe the question was never the problem. Maybe it's the assumption sitting underneath it. Maybe time itself isn't as fixed as everyone around him insists it has to be. He doesn't answer right away. When he finally does, his voice has changed. Sharper, faster. Time is not fixed, he mutters. It depends on the observer. He grabs a blank page and starts writing faster than I've ever seen anyone write, repeating the word relative under his breath like he's afraid it'll disappear if he stops saying it. I haven't told him anything he didn't already suspect. I've only given him permission to trust the thought he was too afraid to finish. We keep talking, and somewhere in that conversation, he stops treating me like an intruder and starts treating me like someone worth arguing with. At some point, he sets his pen down and looks at me properly for the first time. You already understand this, he says. Don't you? I don't deny it. And that's when I make a decision I probably shouldn't. I tell him what his idea becomes. I tell him that 100 years from now, satellites will orbit the Earth carrying atomic clocks, and that those clocks will drift out of sync with clocks on the ground for the exact reason he's scribbling on that page right now, because time moves differently depending on speed and gravity. I tell him that without correcting for that drift, every GPS system on the planet would be wrong by miles within a single day. He stares at me like I've just described magic using his own handwriting. I tell him about the atom, how this same idea will eventually unlock energy trapped inside matter itself, powering entire cities, and, more darkly, ending a war in a way that will haunt him for the rest of his life. His expression shifts when I say that part. He asks quietly whether the world uses this knowledge to build or to destroy. I tell him honestly both. He goes silent for a long moment, then says something I won't forget. Then I hope they remember it was meant to explain the universe, not end it. I tell him one more thing, that scientists will use his equations to describe black holes, places where his own theory predicts that time nearly stops entirely. He laughs for the first time all night and says that if that's true, then somewhere out there, someone might build a machine capable of exactly what I just did to get into this room. He isn't wrong. By the time I get up to leave, he's barely listening. He's already lost in the page again, crossing out lines, restarting, chasing the idea before it can slip away from him a second time. He won't sleep that night. Within weeks, He'll begin drafting a paper the likes of which no journal has ever seen. He'll never mention a stranger who visited him in March. Maybe because there wasn't one. Or maybe, in the end, he simply forgot every detail of that night except the idea itself, and the strange, brief certainty that somebody, somewhere, already knew how the story ends. That 5-page paper becomes Special Relativity, and it quietly rewrites how humanity understands time, space, gravity, and eventually, the atom itself. GPS, nuclear energy, black hole physics, all of it traces back to a patent clerk nobody expected anything from. He goes from anonymous to the most recognized scientist in history. And somewhere in that legacy, buried in a conversation nobody else witnessed, is a man who briefly got to know exactly what his idea would cost the world, and chose to keep chasing it anyway. But Einstein wasn't the only man ever handed a question he wasn't ready for. Weeks from now, I'll be standing in a war room on the morning of March 15th. The exact day a Roman general is warned, in explicit detail, that today is the day he dies. He'll laugh it off. I'll be standing 3 feet away when he does. That story is even harder to believe than this one, and it will be live on the channel. If you've ever had a moment where a single idea changed everything for you, drop it in the comments. I read everyone before deciding who I visit next. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. Subscribe if you want to know who's next.